I always thought identity theft happened to strangers, not family, not your own sister. But there it was, staring at me from my kitchen counter, a credit card statement with my name on it, showing purchases I'd never made at stores I'd never visited. My name is Annabelle, and my sister Olivia has always been the golden child. While I worked my way through college waiting tables, she breezed through law school on our parents' dime. When I bought my modest first car, she got a BMW for her birthday. That's just how things were in our family. Olivia first, me second. Annie, you won't believe what happened at work today. Olivia's voice rang through my phone just last week during our regular sister catch-up call. The partners are considering me for a promotion. Me, the youngest associate. That's amazing, Liv, I replied, trying to ignore the familiar twinge of inadequacy. You always land on your feet. Well, her voice dropped to a whisper. Between us, things aren't quite as perfect as they seem. I'm having some money troubles. That got my attention. What kind of troubles? Just some credit card debt, and the mortgage, and my car payment. She sighed dramatically. I don't know what to do, Annie. I can't tell Mom and Dad. They'd be so disappointed. My heart ached for her. I can help you make a budget, maybe look into debt consolidation. You're the best sister ever, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I don't know what I'd do without you. Now, staring at this mysterious credit card statement, her words took on a whole new meaning. My hands shook as I opened the envelope and scanned the charges. $500 at Nordstrom, $300 at Sephora, $750 at some high-end furniture store, all in the past month, all under my name. This has to be a mistake, I muttered, reaching for my phone. I dialed the credit card company's number. Hello, I'm calling about some charges I don't recognize on my account. 20 minutes later, I hung up feeling sick to my stomach. The account had been opened 6 months ago, with my social security number and all my personal information. The representative confirmed multiple cards had been issued, all actively being used. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Family dinner tonight at 6. Don't be late like last time. I couldn't face them. Not yet. Not until I knew for sure. I called my best friend Eric instead. Hey, what's up? His familiar voice was comforting. Can you come over? I need your help with something. Be there in 15. When Eric arrived, I showed him the statement. His usually cheerful face turned serious as he examined it. Look at these signatures, he said, pointing to the back of the statement. Compare them to this birthday card Olivia sent you last month. The resemblance was undeniable. Same elaborate O, same flowing curves. She's been living this perfect life by stealing from me, I whispered, the reality finally sinking in. My own sister. My phone buzzed again. Mom, where are you? Everyone's waiting. Go to dinner, Eric advised. Act normal. We'll figure this out. An hour later, I sat at my parents' dining table, watching Olivia charm everyone with stories about her latest court victory. She wore a new dress I'd seen on the credit card statement. Annie, you're quiet tonight, Mom noticed, passing the potatoes. Everything okay? Just tired from work, I lied, avoiding Olivia's gaze. You work too hard, Olivia chimed in, reaching for the wine. You should treat yourself sometimes. I gripped my fork tighter, thinking of all the ways she'd been treating herself, with my identity, my credit, my future. Maybe I will, I replied, meeting her eyes. For a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. Fear? Guilt? But then it was gone, replaced by her usual dazzling smile. As I drove home that night, my mind raced. The sister I'd looked up to, the one I'd always tried to measure up to, had been stealing from me all along. The perfect life she flaunted was built on lies. My lies. I pulled into my driveway and noticed another envelope in my mailbox, another credit card statement. This time, when I opened it, I didn't feel shock or confusion. I felt something else entirely. Rage. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about years of being second best, of making excuses for her, of trying to help her even when she was actively destroying my life. Well, no more. It was time for little sister to step out of the shadow and into the light. And Olivia? She was about to learn that karma has a way of catching up, especially when karma has access to bank statements and a very good memory. You need to see this, I told Eric, spreading documents across my kitchen table. 3 credit cards, 2 personal loans, and a store card, all opened in my name over the last 8 months. Eric whistled as he flipped through the papers. How much are we talking about? Almost $40,000. My voice cracked. And that's just what I've found so far. Have you checked your credit report? I nodded, pulling up the website on my laptop. Look at this. My score dropped 200 points. I didn't even notice because I haven't needed to use my credit recently. We should document everything, Eric said, already reaching for his phone to take photos. Every statement, every charge, every signature. My phone lit up with a text from Olivia. Hey sis, lunch tomorrow? My treat. The audacity, Eric muttered, reading over my shoulder. Your treat is right. Technically, I typed back. Sure, usual place at 12:30? Perfect, can't wait to see you. You're really going? Eric asked, raising an eyebrow. Know your enemy, I replied, sorting through more paperwork. Plus, I want to see if she slips up. The next day, I arrived at our favorite cafe to find Olivia already seated, wearing another new outfit. She stood to hug me, her designer perfume overwhelming. I ordered your usual, she said, beaming. The salmon salad, right? I forced a smile. Thanks. So, she leaned forward conspiratorially. Remember that promotion I mentioned? It's happening, but her face fell slightly. The partnership buy-in is steep. I might need to borrow some money. My stomach churned. How much? Just 15,000? I'll pay you back as soon as the first profit shares come in. I took a sip of water, buying time. Why not ask Mom and Dad? Oh, you know how they get. All those questions. She waved her hand dismissively. Besides, you're so much better with money than I am. You always have been. Have I? I asked, thinking of the fraudulent charges. Seems like you're doing pretty well for yourself. Something flickered in her eyes. What do you mean? Just that your lifestyle seems expensive. The waiter arrived with our food, breaking the tension. Olivia immediately launched into a story about her latest court case, skillfully changing the subject. After lunch, I headed straight to the bank. The manager's office was cool and quiet, a welcome relief from my racing thoughts. Ms. Grant, the manager said, reviewing my documentation. This is serious. Identity theft typically requires filing a police report. It's complicated, I replied. Can you at least freeze my accounts for now? Of course. We'll also flag any new applications using your social security number. Back home, Eric was waiting with more discoveries. I did some digging, he said, pulling up a spreadsheet. Look at these transactions. She's been systematically maxing out each card, then opening new ones. Classic credit card kiting, I muttered. She's a lawyer. She knows exactly what she's doing. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Dinner at Grandma Melena's this Saturday. She's making your favorite pot roast. Perfect timing, Eric said. Your grandmother's always been the voice of reason in your family. I shook my head. I can't ruin another family dinner, not yet. Then when? While she ruins your credit score even more? Before I could respond, my email pinged. My heart stopped when I saw the subject line. Your loan application has been approved. What loan application? I clicked open the email. $50,000? I never applied for this. Eric grabbed his laptop. When was this submitted? Yesterday, right after our lunch. My hands were shaking. She must have gotten desperate when I wouldn't give her the $15,000. This is crossing a line, Annabelle. She's escalating. I stared at the approval letter, feeling something inside me harden. You're right. No more waiting. I pulled out my phone and opened my photo gallery. Pictures of forged signatures, screenshots of fraudulent applications, spreadsheets tracking every unauthorized charge, months of evidence meticulously gathered. What are you going to do? Eric asked quietly. Grandma's dinner is Saturday, I said, my voice steady. Everyone will be there. It's time for the perfect sister to face some imperfect truths. As I organized the evidence into a folder, another email arrived. A payment confirmation for a luxury spa weekend, charged to one of my cards. She's not even trying to hide it anymore, I said, adding the new charge to my spreadsheet. She thinks I'm too weak to stand up to her. Eric squeezed my shoulder. She's about to learn otherwise. Yes, I agreed, closing the folder. She certainly is. I stood outside Olivia's apartment building, clutching my folder of evidence. The doorman recognized me and let me up without calling. After all, I was here often enough, always playing the role of supportive sister. Not today. I knocked on her door, hearing muffled voices inside, a man's voice, then quick footsteps. Olivia opened the door, looking flustered. Annie, what are you doing here? We need to talk. I pushed past her into the apartment. A man I didn't recognize was hastily putting on his jacket. I'll call you later, he said to Olivia, slipping past me. Who was that? I asked after he left. Just a colleague. Olivia straightened her blouse. What's so urgent? I dropped the folder on her glass coffee table. Care to explain these? She barely glanced at the contents. What are those supposed to be? Credit card statements, loan applications, all in my name, all with your signature. Her face remained perfectly composed. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? I pulled out my phone, showing her a video. This is security footage from Nordstrom last week. That's you, using my credit card. Finally, a crack in her facade. Annie, listen. No, you listen. My voice shook. $40,000 in credit card debt. A $50,000 loan I never applied for. My credit score is ruined. I was gonna pay it all back. She paced the room, wine glass in hand. Things got a little out of control, but I have it handled. Handled? You're committing fraud. Don't be so dramatic. She took a long sip of wine. We're sisters. What's mine is yours, right? That's not how this works, Liv. You stole my identity. I borrowed it, she corrected, refilling her glass. Temporarily, once this promotion comes through. There is no promotion, is there? Her silence was answer enough. How long have you been lying to everyone? I pressed. About your job, your money, everything? You don't understand the pressure I'm under. She collapsed onto her designer couch, probably bought with my credit card. Everyone expects me to be perfect. Mom, Dad, the whole family. So, you decided to destroy my life instead of admitting you needed help? Her phone rang. She glanced at it, then declined the call. It's just a collections agency. They've been harassing me. In my name. Look. She set down her wine glass, suddenly businesslike. What do you want? Money? I can get it. Just give me time. I want my identity back. I want you to confess to Mom and Dad. No. She stood up, swaying slightly. You can't tell them. They'll never forgive me. Then I'll go to the police. You wouldn't dare. Her eyes narrowed. I'm your sister. Are you? Because sisters don't do this to each other. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Don't forget dinner at Grandma's tomorrow. Olivia saw the message. You better not say anything tomorrow. Or what? Or I'll tell them about that abortion you had in college. I froze. How did you? I'm your emergency contact, remember? The clinic called me when you didn't answer your phone. That was 5 years ago. I was scared and alone. Mom would be heartbroken. Dad would never look at you the same way. I grabbed my folder and headed for the door. You really want to play this game? Fine. But remember, I have actual evidence of your crimes. Annie, wait. She grabbed my arm. Please, I'm sorry. I'll figure something out. You have until tomorrow night, I said, pulling away. Either you tell them or I will. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. Eric. How did it go? She tried to blackmail me. I started the engine. But I'm done being afraid of her. What's the plan? Dinner at Grandma's tomorrow. One way or another, the truth comes out. Want me on standby? Please, I might need a getaway driver. After hanging up, I sat in my car, watching Olivia's apartment window. Her silhouette paced back and forth, phone to her ear, probably calling in favors, trying to find a way out of this mess. But there was no way out. Not anymore. My phone buzzed again, another credit alert. She just tried to open a new card in my name. Really, Liv? I muttered, adding it to my evidence file. You're just making this easier for me. Tomorrow, the perfect sister would fall from her pedestal. Tomorrow, the truth would shatter our family's carefully maintained illusions. Tomorrow, Olivia would learn that some debts can't be paid with stolen credit cards, and I would finally step out of her shadow into my own light. Grandma Milena's house always smelled like pot roast and lavender. Today, it also reeked of tension. Annie, you're early, Mom said, stirring something on the stove. Help me with these potatoes? I grabbed a peeler, watching Olivia through the kitchen window. She was outside with Dad and our family friend Virgil, laughing at something on her phone. She'd shown up in another new outfit, complete with designer sunglasses. Olivia looks stressed lately, Grandma Milena observed, settling into her kitchen chair. Too much work, I think. Something like that, I muttered. What was that, dear? Nothing, Grandma. The doorbell rang. Olivia rushed to answer it, nearly tripping over her own feet. I'll get it, I heard hushed voices, then the door closing. When Olivia returned to the backyard, her hands were shaking as she lit a cigarette. Since when does she smoke? Mom frowned. Since when doesn't she? I replied, perhaps too sharply. Mom gave me a look. What's going on between you two? Why don't you ask her about her promotion? I suggested, setting down the peeler. The one that requires a $15,000 buy-in? Before Mom could respond, Olivia burst back into the kitchen, making a beeline for the wine cabinet. It's barely 4 o'clock, Grandma Milena noted. It's 5 somewhere. Olivia's laugh was too high, too brittle. I watched her pour a generous glass of red wine, her third since arriving an hour ago. Olivia, I said quietly, remember our conversation yesterday? She nearly dropped the wine bottle. Not now, Annie. When, then, after you've opened another credit card in my name? What? Mom turned from the stove. What are you talking about? Nothing, Olivia said quickly. Annie's just confused about some paperwork. $40,000 worth of confusion? I pulled out my phone, showing Mom the latest credit alert. This just came through an hour ago. Another attempt to open a card in my name. The kitchen fell silent. Even the sounds from the backyard seemed muted. Girls? Grandma Milena's voice was gentle but firm. What's happening? Olivia drained her wine glass. It's not what it looks like. Really? I opened my evidence folder on the kitchen table. Because it looks like identity theft, fraud, and enough evidence to put you in prison. Prison? Mom's face went pale. Olivia, what did you do? I needed help. Olivia's voice cracked. The firm was downsizing. I lost my job 6 months ago. The bills were piling up. You lost your job? Dad appeared in the doorway, Virgil behind him. But you said you were getting promoted. I lied, okay? Olivia's mascara was running now. I lied about everything, the job, the money, all of it. So you stole from your sister? Grandma Milena's disappointment was palpable. I was going to pay it back. Olivia reached for the wine bottle again, but Dad moved it away. How? I demanded. With what money? The money from the job you don't have? Virgil stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. I should go. No, stay, I said. You should hear this too. That business investment she asked you about last week? She was planning to use my identity for that too. Virgil's eyes widened. Is that true? Olivia's silence was damning. There's more, I continued, pulling out more documents. Remember that luxury car she bought last month? The one she said was a company perk? That's in my name, too, along with 3 credit cards, 2 personal loans, and a store card. Oh, Olivia, Mom sank into a chair. How could you? I'm sorry. Olivia was fully crying now. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told us the truth, Dad said quietly. We would have helped you. I didn't want to disappoint you. She looked around the kitchen, finding no sympathy. Annie, please, don't do this. You did this, I replied. Every time you forged my signature, every time you lied, every time you chose your pride over my future. Grandma Milena stood up slowly. Olivia, go wash your face. When you come back, we're going to discuss how you're going to fix this. Fix it? Olivia laughed hysterically. I'm drowning in debt. I can barely afford my rent. Then maybe, I said, gathering my evidence, it's time to stop living a lie and start facing reality. As Olivia stumbled toward the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of her phone screen. Another loan application, half filled out. In my name. She hadn't learned anything at all. But the night was still young, and I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. She's still trying to open accounts in your name? Eric's voice crackled through my phone speaker. Even after being caught? I paced my living room, too wired to sit. 3 attempts since the confrontation at Grandma's. She's desperate. What did your parents say? Dad's devastated. Mom keeps making excuses. She was under so much pressure. She didn't mean to hurt anyone. I kicked off my shoes. Meanwhile, Olivia's playing victim. She called me 5 times yesterday, crying about how I've ruined her life. You ruined her life? That's rich. My doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Olivia, mascara smeared, clutching her designer purse. She's here, I whispered to Eric. I'll call you back. Want me to come over? No, but stay by your phone. I opened the door. Olivia stumbled in, reeking of alcohol at 2 p.m. You have to help me, she slurred. The bank's threatening to repossess my car. You mean my car? The one you fraudulently purchased in my name? She collapsed onto my couch. I can't lose everything, Annie. I just can't. You should have thought about that before. I know what I did, she shouted, then immediately softened her voice. I know, but you're my sister. We can figure something out. My phone buzzed. Another credit alert. I checked it, then held up the screen. Like this? Another credit card application? Submitted 20 minutes ago? Color drained from her face. I was desperate. Get out. Annie, please. Get out. I yanked open the door. Before I call the police. She stood unsteadily. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Fine. She grabbed her purse. But remember, I know things about you too. Things that would break Mom's heart. Go ahead. Tell them about the abortion. Tell them everything. At least I'm not a criminal. She stepped closer, her wine-soured breath in my face. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Is that a threat? It's a warning. Back off, little sister. You're playing a game you can't win. After she left, I called Eric back. She threatened me, I said, hands shaking. Actually threatened me. That's it. We're going to the police. No, not yet. I have a better idea. I pulled up my calendar. Mom's birthday dinner is this weekend. Everyone will be there, including Grandma Milena. What are you thinking? Olivia can't resist a captive audience or an open bar. You're going to let her drink? I'm going to let her do what she always does, try to charm her way out of trouble. Only this time, it won't work. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Family meeting tomorrow night. Please come. We need to discuss Olivia's situation. Perfect, I muttered. Another chance for her to manipulate everyone. Want backup? Eric asked. No, I need to handle this myself, but I'll record everything. The next evening, I arrived at my parents' house to find Olivia already holding court in the living room. I've been looking at rehabilitation programs, she was saying, for shopping addiction. It's a real condition, you know. That doesn't explain the identity theft, Dad said firmly. Daddy, I was sick. I wasn't thinking clearly. I cleared my throat. Everyone turned. Annie, Olivia jumped up. I was just telling everyone about my recovery plan. Really? I pulled out my phone. Does your recovery plan include the loan application you submitted this morning or the credit card you tried to open yesterday? Mom gasped. Olivia, you promised you'd stop. I had to. Olivia's voice rose hysterically. My landlord's threatening to evict me. Where am I supposed to go? Home, Grandma Milena said quietly. Where we can help you. The right way. I don't need help. I need everyone to stop judging me. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. She's getting worse, I said into the silence. And she's not going to stop until someone makes her. What do you suggest? Dad asked. I took a deep breath. I have a plan, but I need everyone's help. As I outlined my idea, I saw understanding dawn in their faces. Even Mom, always quick to defend Olivia, nodded slowly. My phone buzzed one last time. Another credit alert. This time, I smiled. Let her dig herself deeper. By Sunday night, she'd learned that some holes are too deep to charm your way out of, and I'd be there to watch her fall. Mom's birthday dinner was in full swing at the upscale restaurant Dad had chosen. Olivia was on her fourth martini, regaling everyone with stories about cases she hadn't actually worked on. And then the judge said, she paused, swaying slightly. Annie, why aren't you drinking? It's a celebration. Someone has to drive, I replied, watching her reach for the wine list. Grandma Milena caught my eye and nodded slightly. The plan was in motion. Olivia, darling, Mom said, tell everyone about your new position at the firm. Olivia's hand froze on her glass. Oh, it's still in negotiations. Really? I pulled out my phone. Because I called your firm yesterday. They said you haven't worked there for 8 months. The table went silent. You had no right, Olivia hissed. I had every right, especially after this arrived today. I slid a document across the table. Another loan application for $60,000. Dad picked up the paper. Olivia, this was submitted an hour ago. I can explain. Please do, Grandma Milena said. Explain why you're still trying to steal from your sister. Olivia grabbed her martini, draining it. You don't understand. None of you do. I had a plan. Was your plan to destroy my credit? To rack up enough debt to buy a house? I leaned forward. Or was it just to keep living a lie until everything fell apart? Stop it. She slammed her glass down. You're just jealous because I'm the successful one. Successful? I laughed. You're unemployed, drowning in debt, and facing potential criminal charges. That's not success, Olivia. That's delusion. She tried to stand but stumbled. Dad caught her arm. Sit down, he said firmly. We're not done. I'm done, she slurred. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do. I nodded to the waiter who brought over a laptop. Because I have something to show everyone. I opened the computer, turning it so everyone could see. On screen was a detailed spreadsheet of every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, every illegal application. 8 months, I narrated as I scrolled. Over $90,000 in total debt. 23 attempts to open new accounts, including 3 since you were caught. Olivia reached for another drink, but Grandma Milena moved it away. That's enough alcohol, she said. It's time for truth. Fine, Olivia's voice rose, drawing looks from nearby tables. You want the truth? I lost everything. My job, my apartment, my reputation, all because of one mistake. What mistake? Mom asked softly. I I borrowed money from a client's account, just temporarily, but someone found out, and I had to resign before they reported me to the bar association. Dad put his head in his hands. Oh, Olivia, I thought I could fix it, she continued, mascara running. Get another job, pay it back before anyone noticed. But then the bills kept coming, and my savings ran out, and Annie always had perfect credit. So you stole my identity. I borrowed it. I was going to pay everything back. With what money? I pulled up another document. Your bank account shows a balance of negative $400. You haven't made a single payment on any of these debts. I can't. She started sobbing. I can't do this anymore. That's right, Grandma Milena said. You can't, which is why we're here. I pulled out a final document. This is a confession letter detailing everything you've done. Sign it. Or what? Or I go to the police. Your choice. Her hand shook as she read the letter. This says I have to pay everything back. Every penny, Dad confirmed, through legitimate work and a payment plan we've arranged. And community service, I added. Lots of it. You're destroying my life, she whispered. No, Olivia, you did that yourself. She stared at the letter for a long moment, then grabbed a pen. Her signature was shaky but legible. What happens now? She asked, suddenly sounding very small. Now, Mom said, you come home, where we can help you recover, the right way. And my apartment, my things? All gone, I said. The luxury lifestyle you couldn't afford ends tonight. Olivia slumped in her chair, the reality finally sinking in. Her perfect facade had cracked, revealing the mess beneath. As we left the restaurant, she grabbed my arm. I really am sorry, Annie. I know, I replied, gently removing her hand. But sorry isn't enough anymore. Actions have consequences, Olivia. It's time you faced yours. She nodded, then let Dad lead her to his car. As they drove away, Grandma Milena squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, she said. I know, I replied, watching the tail lights disappear. But why doesn't it feel like victory? 1 week after the restaurant confrontation, I stood in Olivia's apartment, helping her pack. The designer clothes were gone, sold to pay debts. The luxury furniture would go next. What about this? I held up a framed law school diploma. Keep it, she said quietly, to remind me of what I lost. Mom appeared in the doorway with empty boxes. The donation truck will be here in an hour. Olivia nodded, folding a simple sweater. She looked different now. No makeup, hair pulled back, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. More real somehow. Annie, she said suddenly, there's something you should see. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small box. Inside were dozens of family photos, holidays, birthdays, graduations. In every picture, she was front and center, beaming, while I stood in the background. I kept these to remind myself who I was supposed to be, she explained. The perfect daughter, the successful lawyer, the one who had it all together. And now? Now I know it was all fake. Every smile, every achievement, built on lies and stolen identity. The doorbell rang. Dad's voice carried from the entryway. "The credit counselor is here." A woman in a business suit entered, carrying a thick folder. "Ms. Grant, I'm Sarah from Financial Recovery Services." Olivia straightened her shoulders. "Yes, that's me. I've reviewed your case. The total debt across all fraudulent accounts is $93,427. We've worked out a payment plan, but it will take time." "How long?" I asked. "With community service credit and minimum wage work?" "About 5 years." Olivia's face crumpled. 5 years? "Would you prefer prison?" Dad's voice was stern. "Because that's the alternative." "No," she whispered. "I'll do it." Sarah opened her folder. "Let's go through the terms. First, you'll work at the homeless shelter 4 days a week. The salary goes directly to debt repayment. Weekends, you'll do community service at the local library." "What about my law license?" "Suspended," Dad said. "The Bar Association's ethics committee is reviewing your case." Olivia nodded, tears falling. "I deserve that." "You'll live with us," Mom added. "No rent but strict rules. No credit cards. No loans. No internet shopping. And weekly therapy," I said. "Non-negotiable." Sarah pulled out more papers. "I need signatures on these forms. They authorize wage garnishment and credit monitoring." As Olivia signed, her hands trembling, I noticed something. For the first time, she was using her own signature, not the flowing script she'd used to forge mine. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out my own document, "a contract between sisters." Olivia looked up. "What?" "If you complete the payment plan, attend therapy, and stay honest for 5 years, I'll help you rebuild. But if you ever try to steal my identity again, you'll press charges," she finished. "I understand. Not just charges. I'll walk away, permanently." The room went silent. Even Mom, always ready to defend Olivia, said nothing. "Sign it," I said. She did, then pushed back from the table. "I need some air." On the balcony, Olivia lit her last cigarette. "I really thought I could fix everything myself. Keep the perfect image going." "Perfect isn't real," I replied. "Neither was the person you were pretending to be." "And now? Who am I now?" "Someone who has to earn back trust, starting with mine." The donation truck arrived, and we watched as Olivia's carefully curated life was loaded away. Designer bags, expensive art, the trappings of success she'd bought with stolen credit. "Your first shift at the shelter starts tomorrow," Dad said. 6 a.m. sharp." "I'll drive you," I offered. Olivia looked surprised. "You will?" "Every morning, until you prove you can handle it yourself. Think of it as accountability." "And protection," Mom added, "to make sure you don't run away." "I won't," Olivia said firmly. "I promise." "Promises are just words," Grandma Milena said, appearing with packed lunches. "Actions matter more." As we carried the last boxes down, Olivia stopped at her mailbox. Inside was a credit card offer, pre-approved, promising easy money. Without hesitation, she handed it to me. "You take it. I don't trust myself yet." I tore it up, letting the pieces flutter into the trash. "That's the first smart decision you've made in months." "It won't be the last," she said quietly. "I'm going to fix this, Annie. All of it." "I know," I replied, watching her climb into Dad's car with nothing but a duffel bag of basic clothes. "Because this time, you don't have a choice." The car pulled away, taking my sister toward her new life. One built on truth instead of theft, reality instead of illusion, and maybe, just maybe, toward redemption. The homeless shelter's kitchen buzzed with morning activity as I dropped off Olivia for her shift. She'd traded designer clothes for a simple uniform, her once perfect manicure stained from food prep. "Coffee's ready," she called out to the breakfast line, "and we've got fresh pastries today." A teenage girl approached the counter. Miss Olivia, can you help me with my college application later? Of course, Sarah. After lunch? I watched from the doorway as Olivia served breakfast, knowing each person's name, their stories, their struggles. The same charm that once fueled her deceptions now helped heal others. She's different, Eric said, joining me with 2 coffee cups. You can see it. The shelter director wants to promote her to program coordinator, I replied, accepting a cup. But she refused. Why? Said she needs to earn it first. Actually, earn it. My phone buzzed. A credit alert. But this time, it was different. A payment notification. $147 transferred from Olivia's work account to my credit card debt. That's the 3rd payment this month, I showed Eric. She's working double shifts to pay extra. Annie, Olivia waved me over. Come meet someone. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman with kind eyes. This is Mrs. Rodriguez. She's teaching me to make authentic empanadas. For the shelter's fundraiser, Mrs. Rodriguez explained. Your sister, she works very hard. Every day, no complaints. The complaints wouldn't help anyway, Olivia said, kneading dough. Besides, I'm learning more here than I ever did in law school. Like what? Humility, gratitude, the difference between having things and having worth. The shelter director appeared, clipboard in hand. Olivia, your parole officer called. She's impressed with your progress. Thanks, but I've got a long way to go. Speaking of progress, I pulled out an envelope. This came today. Olivia wiped her hands on her apron before opening it. Her eyes widened. The Bar Association? They're reviewing my case for reinstatement? After you complete the payment plan and community service requirements, I confirmed. Dad pulled some strings. I don't deserve strings pulled. No, I agreed, but you deserve a chance to rebuild, the right way this time. She pinned the letter to the kitchen's bulletin board. Something to work toward. Miss Olivia, Sarah called from the dining area. Can you look at my essay? Go, I said. I'll help Mrs. Rodriguez with the empanadas. As Olivia sat with Sarah, reviewing college applications, I remembered our conversation from last night at our parents' house. I found my old credit card statements, she'd said over dinner. The real ones, from before, everything. I was spending $3,000 a month just on clothes. And now I have 3 outfits and more satisfaction than all those designer labels ever gave me. Mom had reached for her hand. We're proud of you, sweetheart. Don't be, Olivia had replied. Not yet. Pride has to be earned too. Back in the present, I watched my sister guide Sarah through her application, explaining concepts with the same patience she now showed herself. She helps everyone, Mrs. Rodriguez said, crimping empanada edges. Last week, she stayed late to teach Miguel English. Yesterday, she helped Rosa find a job. The old Olivia would have considered that beneath her. The old Olivia was a mask, she replied wisely. This one? She's real. My phone buzzed again. Another payment notification. Smaller this time, but steady. Like Olivia's recovery. Annie, Olivia called. Sarah has a question about student loans. Maybe you could explain? You're better with money than I am. I joined them at the table, spreading out financial aid forms. As I explained interest rates and repayment terms, I caught Olivia watching me with something new in her eyes. Not envy, not resentment, just simple, genuine admiration. You really know your stuff, she said softly. So do you, I replied. Just different stuff now. Sarah looked between us. Are you guys really sisters? You seem more like friends. Olivia and I exchanged glances. We're becoming both, I said. And there it was, the truth we'd both been working toward. Not perfect sisters, not rival sisters, just sisters, finding our way back to each other through honesty, hard work, and time. Ready for another double shift? I asked Olivia. She tied her apron tighter. Ready, and Annie, thank you for not giving up on me. That's what sisters do, I replied. The real ones, anyway. She smiled, not her old dazzling smile, but something more genuine, more earned, like everything else in her new life.
My name is Stella, a 32-year-old woman who has an unusual profession for some. I'm a fantasy writer. I'm not the kind of writer who's got their name plastered on billboards or anything, but I've got a solid group of readers who wait eagerly for my next book. I'm no J.K. Rowling or Stephen King, but I've carved out my own little corner in the world of fantasy literature. I've always been ambitious, always looking forward. I've never been one to settle for less, and I've worked hard to get where I am. Writing is my passion, my calling. It's what I was meant to do. There's something magical about creating new worlds, about bringing characters to life. It's hard work, but it's worth it. My husband, Mark, is a trader. He's not one of those Wall Street guys, but he works for a reputable trading company. He's good at what he does, and he's proud of it. We've built a comfortable life together. We're not rich, but we have everything we need. Mark is a practical man, always grounded in reality. He's the kind of guy who prefers numbers and facts over fantasies and dreams. He's always been supportive of my writing, but I don't think he's ever fully understood it. Lately, he's been distant, more interested in his phone than in me. I've tried to talk to him about it, but he just brushes me off. Then there's my sister, Lily. She's 22, a whole decade younger than me, and she's still in college. Lily is studying to be a psychologist. She's always been fascinated by the human mind, by what makes people tick. She's bright, ambitious, just like me. I've always been proud of her, always supported her. I've even been paying for her tuition. I thought we had a strong bond, but I was about to find out just how wrong I was. My parents, they're simple, hard-working people. They've always done their best to provide for us. They're not perfect, but they're my family. They've always been there for me, through the ups and downs. I could always count on them. Or so I thought. Life was going okay, I guess. I was busy working on my next book, juggling household chores, and trying to keep my marriage from falling apart. I was stressed, sure, but I thought it was just a phase, something we'd get through. Mark and I began to move away from each other. Each day was the same. He'd return from work, tired and irritable, his briefcase slapping against the wooden floor as he tossed it aside. His fingers would dance over his phone screen, a silent orchestra playing a tune only he could hear. Our conversations had been replaced by the dull hum of the television and the rhythmic tap of his thumb on the phone screen. "Mark, could you lend a hand with the dishes?" I asked one evening, my voice echoing in the kitchen. My fingers were pruned from washing and my back ached from hunching over the sink. My day had been consumed by crafting fantastical worlds, my mind teetering on the edge of reality and imagination. "In a bit, Stella," he replied, his eyes never leaving the glowing screen. His voice was distant, as if he was in another world, a world where I didn't exist. "But I've been working all day too," I protested. My words fell on deaf ears. His attention was elsewhere, swallowed by the digital vortex in his hands. Our conversations, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, had morphed into verbal duels. "You just don't understand, Stella." Mark would snap, his face contorting into a mask of frustration. His knuckles would turn white as he gripped his phone, his anger palpable. I'd stand there, rooted to the spot, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of weaving tales and meeting deadlines, I found myself in the kitchen, stirring a pot of spaghetti. A wave of dizziness washed over me, the room tilting on its axis. I clung to the countertop, my knuckles turning white. "Mark, I called, my voice barely a whisper. I felt weak, my body betraying me. Silence. I turned, my vision blurring at the edges. He was there, on the couch, his phone, his constant companion, in his hand. Anger, hot and potent, welled up inside me. I was tired, I was unwell, and I felt alone in a house that was supposed to be a home. "Mark!" I yelled, my voice piercing the silence. He jolted, his eyes wide. "What?" he snapped, annoyance etched on his face. "I'm not feeling well," I managed to say, my voice shaky. "I need your help." He sighed, a sound that echoed throughout the room. He put his phone down and helped me to the couch. He returned to the kitchen, his movements mechanical as he finished cooking. I watched him, a bitter taste in my mouth. This wasn't the life we had promised each other. It was a day like any other, or so it seemed. I woke up feeling like I'd been run over by a train. My body was heavy, my head was filled with cotton, and I just felt wrong. I decided to get checked out, thinking it was just a nasty bug or something. But the doctor's words hit me like a ton of bricks. "Cancer." "Cancer?" I echoed, my voice sounding small and far away in the sterile room. I felt the world tilt on its axis, my mind struggling to comprehend the news. "Yes, Stella," the doctor said, his voice steady, his face a mask of professional sympathy. "We need to get you started on treatment right away." I was admitted to the hospital that same day. My world, which had already been shaky, was thrown into complete chaos. I was terrified, I was angry, and I felt so incredibly alone. Mark showed up at the hospital after work. He was agitated, tense, and there was something else about him that I couldn't recognize. "Maybe waiting?" "Stella," he stammered, his voice choked with emotion. I don't know what to say." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in a long time. He was here, with me, and in that moment, I realized that we were in this together, for better or for worse. I didn't know then that my sense of hope was false. The days blurred into weeks. I started treatment, and it was brutal. I was always tired, always nauseous. But I was fighting. I was fighting for my life, for a chance to make things right. Mark was there, but he became different. He became fidgety, restless. He'd sit by my bed, tapping his foot incessantly, checking his phone every few minutes. He'd tell me stories to distract me from the pain, but his mind seemed to be elsewhere. I wish I could say that the diagnosis brought us closer, that it mended the cracks in our relationship, but it didn't. It just made everything more complicated, more difficult. My younger sister, Lily, had been making her rounds to the hospital. I'd like to think it was out of concern for me, but her visits quickly proved otherwise. One day, she plopped down in the visitor's chair, her eyes glued to her phone. Without looking up, she said, "You know my birthday's coming up, right?" "Yes, Lily," I responded, a bitter smile playing on my lips. "I haven't forgotten." "Well, I've been eyeing this designer bag," she continued, finally looking up to meet my gaze. Her eyes held an expectation that made my stomach churn. "I hope you got me something good." "Lily," I replied, my eyebrows knitting together in disbelief. "I'm in the hospital. I haven't had a chance to go shopping." She rolled her eyes, a scowl forming on her face. "You've always been so selfish, Stella. Always thinking about yourself." Her words were like a punch to the gut. But I swallowed the hurt, letting out a sigh before responding. "Lily, I love you, but the world doesn't revolve around you. I'm lying here, sick, and all you can think about is a designer bag? That's not right, Lily. You need to think about your priorities." Her face turned a bright shade of red, her eyes welling up with angry tears. She stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. A whole week passed. My husband, Mark, didn't call or visit. I tried reaching out to him, but he never answered. His silence was like a knife to my heart. How could he leave me alone in the hospital like this? Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Mark walked into my hospital room one day. But he wasn't alone. Lily was with him, her arm looped through his. They were smiling, laughing, their behavior strikingly similar to that of a couple. "Mark, what's going on?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "Stella," he said, avoiding my gaze. "Lily and we're together." The room spun around me. I looked at Lily, hoping to see some sign of remorse. But all I saw was a smug smile. "Yes, Stella," she said, her voice dripping with arrogance. "Mark and I are together." I felt a wave of anger wash over me. But instead of lashing out, I took a deep breath and said, "You're both adults, and you can make your own decisions. But you both betrayed me, and I won't stand for it." They didn't leave, oh no, they just stayed standing by the foot of my hospital bed. It was as if they were relishing the moment, savoring the sight of me in a hospital gown, weak and vulnerable. "You know, Stella," Mark started, his voice filled with a strange kind of glee. "You never really noticed me. Always had me doing the chores, never really cared about what I wanted." I looked at him, my eyes narrowing. "Is that so?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his grin growing wider. "Oh, yes. But Lily here, she's different. She understands me, supports me." Lily was smiling too, her eyes twinkling with a cruel kind of joy. "That's right, Stella," she chimed in. "I'm not like you. I care about Mark." I felt a wave of anger wash over me, but I pushed it down. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. "What do you want, Mark?" I asked, my voice steady. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of papers. "Divorce papers," he announced, tossing them onto my bed. "I think it's time we ended this charade, don't you?" I picked up the papers, my eyes scanning over the words. Divorce. So, this was it. This was the end. I reached for a pen and signed the papers, my hand steady. Mark looked surprised. "That's it?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "You're not going to fight it?" I shook my head, tossing the papers back at him. "No, Mark. I'm not going to fight it. You and Lily deserve each other." Lily let out a laugh, a cruel, mocking sound. "Well, Stella," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "At least now I get to live in your house." I felt a pang of hurt, but I didn't let it show. "Get out," I said, my voice cold. "Both of you. Get out of my room." They left, their laughter echoing down the hallway. As soon as they were gone, I reached for my laptop. I logged into my bank account and canceled the tuition payment I had made for Lily's college. She wanted to betray me? Fine, but she wasn't going to do it on my dime. Next, I blocked our shared bank account. Mark had made it clear that he didn't want to be with me anymore. Fine, but he wasn't going to get access to my money. Finally, I called my lawyer. "I need you to prepare the documents for the division of property," I said, my voice steady. "Mark and I are getting a divorce." My lawyer was silent for a moment, but then he said, "I'm sorry to hear that, Stella. I'll get everything ready as soon as possible." As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. I was free. Free from Mark, free from Lily, free from their betrayal. It was a bitter kind of freedom, but it was freedom nonetheless. But I wasn't going to let them break me. I was stronger than that. I knew then that I had to focus on my recovery, not just for my sake, but to show them that I was more than just a sick woman lying in a hospital bed. I was Stella, and I was a fighter. The hospital room was a whirlwind of activity. Doctors and nurses bustled about, their voices a constant hum in the background. Machines beeped and whirred, their noises a stark reminder of the battle I was fighting. A battle against a disease that was as relentless as it was ruthless. In the midst of all this chaos, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my parents' number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Stella," my mother's voice came through the phone. "We heard about the divorce. And about Lily." I sighed, closing my eyes. Of course they had heard. News like that traveled fast. "What do you want, Mom?" I asked, my voice tired. We were wondering," she started, her voice hesitant. "Are you still going to pay for Lily's education?" I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "No, Mom," I said, my voice cold. "I'm not going to pay for the education of the sister who stole my husband." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, my father's voice came through. "Stella, you can't be serious," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "You can't just stop paying for her education." "I can, and I have," I replied, my voice steady. "I've already cancelled the transfer." "But Stella," my mother started, her voice pleading. "She's your sister." "She was my sister," I corrected her. "She stopped being that when she betrayed me." There was more pleading, more attempts to change my mind, but I wasn't having any of it. I ended the call, my heart heavy with a sadness I couldn't shake off. I had my laptop with me, a constant companion in these trying times. And it was on its screen that I began to pour out my feelings, my pain, my anger, my betrayal. Every word I typed was a testament to the storm raging within me, a tangible manifestation of the hurt I was feeling. The pain of my husband's betrayal was a raw, gaping wound. I wrote about it with a brutal honesty, detailing every moment, every conversation, every shared glance that I had overlooked before. I wrote about the shock, the disbelief, the denial, and finally, the acceptance. I wrote about how I had loved him, trusted him, and how he had thrown it all away for my sister. The pain of my sister's betrayal was a different kind of hurt. It was a betrayal of trust, of sisterhood, of shared childhood memories. I wrote about our shared laughter, our shared tears, our shared dreams, and how she had shattered it all with one selfish act. I wrote about the anger I felt towards her, the disappointment, the sense of loss. And then there was the pain of my parents' misunderstanding. The people who were supposed to be my pillars of support, my safe haven, were more concerned about my sister's education than my well-being. I wrote about the hurt their indifference caused, the loneliness, the feeling of being utterly alone in my struggle. Every word I typed was a catharsis, a release of the pent-up emotions threatening to drown me. I wrote about my pain, my anger, my betrayal, but I also wrote about my determination, my resilience, my will to fight. I wrote about the woman I was, the woman I had become, and the woman I aspired to be. In the midst of my darkest hour, I found my voice. I found a way to channel my pain into something creative, something powerful. I was no longer just a woman battling a deadly disease. I was a woman with a story to tell, a story of betrayal and resilience, of pain and strength. And so, I wrote. I wrote until my fingers ached, until my eyes grew heavy with fatigue. I wrote until the words stopped coming, until I had poured out every last bit of my heart onto the pages of my book. As I closed my laptop, a sense of calm washed over me. I had done it. The sterile silence of the hospital room was shattered when the door burst open. In stormed Mark and Lily, their faces twisted into masks of rage and disbelief. Their appearance was a stark contrast to the clinical white of the room, a violent disruption to the quiet hum of the machines monitoring my vitals. "What the hell, Stella?" Mark's voice echoed in the room, his words hanging in the air like a toxic cloud. He was waving a piece of paper in his hand, a bank statement that showed the halted payments for Lily's tuition. I looked at him, my eyes cold and unyielding. "It's a bank statement, Mark," I replied, my voice steady, even as my heart pounded in my chest. "You're a smart man. You can figure out what it means. His face reddened, his jaw clenching in anger. You stopped the payments for Lily's tuition, he accused, his voice filled with outrage. You can't do that. The sound of my laughter cut through the tension in the room. It was a harsh, bitter sound, devoid of any real humor. I think you'll find that I can, I retorted, a smirk playing on my lips. And I have. You two will have to sort out your own finances now. Lily, who had been standing silently by Mark's side, finally found her voice. Stella, I need that money, she pleaded, her eyes wide with desperation. I can't finish my degree without it. I turned my gaze to her, my eyes hard. Well, Lily, I replied, my voice icy. You should have thought about that before you decided to betray me. Actions have consequences. Mark was fuming now, his fists clenched at his sides. You can't do this to us, Stella, he growled, his voice low and threatening. I raised an eyebrow, unfazed by his anger. I think you'll find that I can, I told him, my voice calm and steady. And just so you know, I'm selling our house. So, I suggest you start looking for a new place to live. The room fell into stunned silence, the only sound being the steady beep of the heart monitor. Mark and Lily stood there, their faces a picture of shock and disbelief. The reality of their situation was finally sinking in. Without another word, they turned and left, their footsteps echoing down the hospital corridor. The door closed behind them with a soft click, restoring the room to its previous silence. As I settled back into the hospital bed, a sense of relief washed over me. I had done it. I had stood up to them, stood up for myself. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it was a victory nonetheless. And as I closed my eyes, a small smile played on my lips. I was taking control of my life again, and it felt good. Months had passed since the confrontation with Mark and Lily. The bitterness of their betrayal had faded, replaced by a sense of peace and contentment I hadn't felt in a long time. I was cancer-free, the disease that had once threatened to take everything away from me now just a distant memory. I sat in my new house, a quaint little place that I had bought with the profits from my book. It wasn't as grand as the house I had shared with Mark, but it was mine. Every inch of it was a testament to my survival, my victory. My book, a tell-all about my journey, was a hit. People loved it, and the royalties were rolling in. I had even been featured on a couple of talk shows, sharing my story with the world. It was surreal, the way my life had turned around. One day, as I was sipping coffee in my kitchen, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Mark standing there, looking lost and defeated. He had lost weight, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. Stella, he started, his voice shaky. I need to talk. I looked at him, my eyes showing no sympathy. What is it, Mark? I asked, my voice devoid of any warmth. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. I messed up, Stella, he confessed, his eyes downcast. Lily and we broke up. She's moved back in with your parents. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Karma had finally caught up with them. And why should I care, Mark? I asked, my voice cold. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. I just wanted to apologize, Stella, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. I stared at him for a moment, taking in the sight of the man who had once meant the world to me. He was a shadow of his former self, broken and defeated, but I felt no pity for him. Your apology means nothing to me, Mark, I told him, my voice firm. You made your bed, now lie in it. With that, I closed the door in his face, leaving him standing on the porch. I returned to my kitchen, my coffee now cold. But I didn't care. The sweet taste of victory was far more satisfying. As I sat there, sipping my cold coffee, I couldn't help but smile. I had come out on top, stronger and happier than ever. I had survived the betrayal, the disease, and come out the other side a better person. I had tasted victory, and it was sweet. I had won. And as I looked around my new house, my new life, I knew that I had finally found my peace. I was content, happy. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly free. And so, my story ends here. Not with a bang, but with a quiet sense of satisfaction. A victory not just over my disease, but over the people who had tried to bring me down. A victory that was all the more sweet because it was mine, and mine alone. I had won. And the sweet taste of victory was all I needed. My name is Wendy. My mother, Mary, was a silent shadow in the house, her voice barely a whisper against my father, George's, booming commands. I remember the day my youngest brother, Tom, was born. The house, usually grim and silent, buzzed with a different energy. My father's stern face cracked into a rare smile, a sight so unfamiliar it almost scared me. Finally, another boy. George boomed, his voice echoing through the walls. A real man to carry on the family name. I was 10, standing in the corner, clutching my ragged doll, feeling smaller than usual. Mother, with her usual downcast eyes, turned to me briefly, her look fleeting but full of an unspoken apology. As the years rolled on, the gap between me and my family grew wider. I was like a ghost in my own home, seen but never acknowledged, unless it was to criticize or to command. "Wendy, make yourself useful and help your mother," George would say, not even bothering to look at me. His world was black and white, a world where women had their place, and that place certainly wasn't alongside men. Then, like a breath of fresh air in a suffocating room, my Aunt Laura visited. She was my mother's younger sister, but lived a world apart. She and her husband, Uncle John, couldn't have children, and she saw something in me that perhaps even I didn't see at the time. "Mary, George, I want to talk about Wendy," she said one evening, her voice firm, her eyes locking with each of theirs in turn. "What about her?" my father grunted, his disinterest palpable. "She's not a child anymore. She needs more than what she's getting here. She needs education, freedom, a chance to be more," Laura said, her voice unwavering. "And what do you propose?" my father asked, his tone dismissive, his eyes already drifting to the television. "I want to take her with me. John and I can provide for her, give her the opportunities she deserves." There was a pause, the kind that's heavy and thick, filled with unspoken words and buried resentments. "And why would we just hand over our daughter to you?" my father finally said, his words sharp like a knife. "Because, George, you and I both know you don't care about her. You care about your sons, your precious legacy. Wendy is just another mouth to feed, another pair of hands to work around the house. With me, she'll be more. So, what do you say?" The room went silent. My mother's eyes were on the floor, her hands wringing her apron. My father's face was unreadable, a mask of indifference. "Do what you want," he said finally, turning back to the TV, dismissing us, dismissing my entire existence with a flick of his wrist. And just like that, I was given a new life, a chance to escape the invisible chains. Aunt Laura's house was different. There, words were spoken with kindness, and dreams weren't just laughed at but nurtured. Uncle John treated me not as a burden but as a promise of what could be. College was like stepping into another universe. I was eternally grateful to my aunt and uncle, who gave me the opportunity to study and explore the world. I met Michael in an economics class. He was debating with the professor, his confidence filling the room. I remember thinking, who is this guy? He noticed me too, but not for the reasons I would have liked. "Hey, you! Why do you look so serious? This is college, lighten up," he teased, flashing a grin that most girls in class swooned over. I wasn't most girls. "Maybe because I'm here to learn, not to fool around," I shot back, my eyes meeting his, challenging. He looked surprised, then intrigued. "I'm Michael," he said, extending his hand. "Wendy," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. That was the beginning. We were like two planets in orbit, drawn together by a force we couldn't resist. We studied together, debated fiercely, and laughed loudly. His family, who lived in another city, welcomed me with open arms. His mother, Linda, was warm and caring, a stark contrast to my own mother's subdued presence. "Wendy, dear, you're like the daughter I never had," Linda exclaimed one day as we were baking in her cozy kitchen. I felt a lump in my throat. "Thank you, Linda. You and Michael have made me feel so welcome." Michael's father, Peter, was more reserved, but his nods of approval spoke volumes. "You're good for our Michael. Keeps him on his toes," he would say with a twinkle in his eye. Life with Michael felt like a dream, but not the kind that fades with the morning light. It was real, vibrant, and filled with love. When we found out about the baby, it was the cherry on top of our already perfect life. His family's reaction was joyous. "A grandchild. Oh, Wendy, you've made us so happy." Linda hugged me tightly, her happiness infectious. Peter clapped Michael on the back. "You're going to be a great dad, just like you're a great son." Life was buzzing with the anticipation of our baby when the doorbell rang one chilly evening. Michael was late from work, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, I opened the door and was met with a face from the past. Tom, my youngest brother, looking weary, his eyes avoiding mine. "Tom? What are you doing here?" I stammered, my heart pounding with a mixture of shock and a strange sense of foreboding. "Hey, Wendy. I left home. I can't stand it there anymore. I need a place to crash, just for a while," he mumbled, his gaze still fixed on the ground. His sudden appearance after years of silence was jarring. Tom reminded those dark days, standing on my doorstep, asking for refuge. I hesitated, memories of our father's stern voice and cold home flooding back. But looking at Tom, seeing the desperation in his eyes, the shared blood between us spoke louder. "Come in, Tom. You can stay for a few nights," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "Who's this?" Michael asked, surprise etched on his face as he came home to find Tom sitting awkwardly in our living room. "This is Tom, my brother. He left home and needed a place to stay for a few days," I explained, watching Michael's face for any signs of discomfort. Michael nodded, his usual easygoing nature taking over. "All right, man. Make yourself at home. But we have some ground rules in this house. Respect is key." Tom just nodded, his eyes still not meeting ours. The dinner that night was tense, with forced conversation and polite smiles. Afterward, as I was clearing the dishes, Michael pulled me aside. "Wendy, are you sure about this? Your brother seems troubled," he whispered, his concern clear in his eyes. "I know, Michael. But he's family. We can't just turn him away. Let's give him a chance, okay?" I replied, hoping I wasn't making a mistake. The days turned into weeks, and the initial shock of Tom's arrival faded into a grim routine. Our home, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt tense and uneasy. One morning, I found Tom in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge with a disgruntled look on his face. "What's this? Where's the real food? I need a proper breakfast," he grumbled, holding up a carton of almond milk with disdain. "Tom, that's what we have. If you want something else, you're welcome to buy it yourself," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, but feeling my patience wearing thin. He scoffed, slamming the fridge door shut. Back at home, women knew how to take care of the men. They cooked, they cleaned, they didn't talk back. I felt a surge of anger, but I took a deep breath, reminding myself that confrontation wouldn't solve anything. "Tom, this isn't back at home. This is my house, and here, we respect each other. We share responsibilities. If you're not okay with that, maybe it's time you find another place to stay. He looked at me, his eyes cold and challenging, but he didn't say anything. I could tell my words had hit a nerve, but I wasn't sure if they'd made any real impact. Later that day, I was folding laundry when Michael walked in, a worried look on his face. "Wendy, we need to talk about Tom. It's not working out. He's not respecting our space, our rules. It's like he's trying to impose his way of living on us," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "I know, Michael. I feel it too. It's like walking on eggshells around him. But he's my brother. I can't just kick him out," I replied, feeling torn between my loyalty to my family and the need to protect the sanctity of our home. The conversation lingered in my mind as the day went on. That evening, as we all sat down for dinner, the tension was palpable. Tom's attitude was more sullen than usual, his silence a heavy presence at the table. "Tom, we need to talk. This situation isn't working. You're not respecting the way we live, and it's causing a lot of tension," I said, gathering my courage. "So, what? You're kicking me out?" he shot back, his voice sharp. "No, but we need to find a middle ground. You need to respect our rules, our lifestyle. You can't just expect us to change everything for you," I replied, my voice steady but firm. He stared at me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might explode, but then he just nodded his head in agreement and left the room. The days following our confrontation with Tom were strained. It felt as though we were all collectively holding our breath, waiting for the fragile peace to break. And it did, but not in any way we could have anticipated. In my final trimester, when excitement should have been building, I started to feel distinctly unwell. Initially, it was just an unsettling sensation of dizziness and a persistent tiredness, but it rapidly escalated into something more alarming. One morning, the world seemed to spin dangerously, leaving me gripping the bed sheets in desperation. "Michael, something's wrong," I gasped, trying to steady my swirling vision. Immediately, Michael was at my side, his expression etched with deep concern. "What is it, Wendy? Tell me what's happening." It's hard to explain, really dizzy, weak. I think, we need to get to the hospital," I managed between labored breaths, the effort of speaking leaving me exhausted. Without hesitation, Michael supported me to the car, his face a mixture of worry and resolve. The journey to the hospital passed in a haze, my mind a whirlpool of concern for the baby and myself. Upon arrival, the medical team sprang into action, their expressions serious, their movements deliberate. "We need to admit you, monitor both you and the baby closely. It's a precarious situation," one of the doctors said, her tone calm yet authoritative. I simply nodded, the gravity of the situation rendering me speechless. My gaze met Michael's, seeing in his eyes a storm of fear and determination. "Wendy, I'm right here with you. We'll face this together," he assured me, his voice a solid anchor in the tumult of my fears. As days in the hospital turned into weeks, the strain on Michael became increasingly evident. Each visit, I could see the fatigue etching deeper lines on his face, the brightness in his eyes dimming under the weight of his responsibilities. One evening, he arrived looking particularly worn, his usual buoyancy replaced by a heavy tiredness. "Michael, you're running on empty. Is everything okay?" I asked, momentarily setting aside my own worries in the face of his evident exhaustion. He exhaled deeply, the action seeming to drain what little energy he had left. "It's a lot to juggle, work, the house, Tom. It's like I'm trying to hold everything together. But don't worry, I'm managing," he said, though his voice betrayed the immense pressure he was under. Over time, however, the daily visits from Michael began to wane. His phone calls became infrequent, and when he did call, his voice carried a harshness, a coldness that was unfamiliar, yet disturbingly reminiscent of Tom's tone. The warm, supportive husband I knew seemed to have retreated, leaving behind a person whose words and tone mirrored the unsettling and patriarchal attitude that Tom had brought into our home. The shift was subtle yet jarring, a chilling reminder of the oppressive shadows I thought I had left far behind. The day I held my newborn daughter for the first time should have been pure joy, but instead, it was tainted with a harsh reality I never saw coming. After the exhausting labor, I was eager to share the news with Michael, to see the look on his face when he met our daughter. But all my calls went unanswered, his phone ringing into the void. With no other options, I gathered my strength, held my daughter close, and decided to head home, hoping for the best, but bracing for the worst. The taxi ride felt like the longest journey of my life, each mile stretching on as I grappled with a growing sense of dread. When the familiar outline of our home came into view, my heart sank. Michael's car was parked outside, its usual pristine condition replaced by a layer of dirt and neglect. I paid the driver, my hands shaking as I approached the front door, my daughter cradled protectively against my chest. The door creaked open to reveal a scene of utter chaos. The house was a mess, the air thick with the stench of alcohol and neglect. My heart pounded in my chest as I took in the sight of Michael and Tom, both sprawled out, lost in drunken slumber amidst the ruin they had created. Anger surged within me, a fierce, protective instinct for my daughter and for the life we deserved. I shook Michael awake, my voice sharp with a mixture of pain and fury. "Michael! What is this? Look at this mess. And you, drunk in the middle of the day? Is this how you welcome your daughter into the world?" Michael's eyes flickered open, clouded with confusion and the remnants of his inebriation. "Wendy? What are? Oh, the baby. Look, I'm a man, all right? I don't do cleaning. Come on, clean up the house quickly. And the baby, why a girl, Wendy? We needed a boy." His words were like a slap across my face, the harshness, the utter lack of empathy, cutting deeper than any physical wound. I turned to Tom, his smirk only adding fuel to the fire burning within me. "Tom, this is what you bring into my home? Encouraging Michael, supporting this madness? You're both out of your minds." Tom's laughter, cruel and mocking, filled the room. "Ah, Wendy, relax. Michael's just being a man, taking charge. You should be grateful, not nagging." The words, the attitudes, they were a mirror of the past, a past I had fought so hard to break free from. But in that moment, I realized that the battle was far from over. My daughter in my arms, I turned away from the wreckage of what was once a home, my mind made up. I left the house, the weight of my daughter in my arms a reminder of the strength I needed to muster. As I made my way to the hotel, my resolve hardened. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges, but I knew one thing for sure, we wouldn't face it alone. The hotel room was a cold comfort, a temporary shelter from the storm that had upended my life. Holding my daughter close, I dialed Michael's parents, Linda and Peter. My heart pounded as the phone rang, the weight of what I was about to disclose pressing heavily on me. "Hello, Wendy? Is everything all right?" Linda's voice came through, tinged with concern. "Linda, I don't even know where to start. It's about Michael, and the house, and Tom," I stammered, the words catching in my throat. "What's happened, dear?" "You're scaring me," Linda replied, her voice now laced with alarm. I took a deep breath, the reality of my situation settling in. When I came home from the hospital with the baby, I found the house. It was a disaster, Linda. Empty bottles, food everywhere, and Michael and Tom, they were drunk, in the middle of the day. Michael, he said things, terrible things. He's not the man I married. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Oh, my God. Wendy, I'm so sorry. We'll be right there. Don't worry, we'll sort this out, Linda assured me, her voice now firm with resolve. The hours until Linda and Peter's arrival stretched on, each minute heavy with anticipation and dread. When they finally knocked on my hotel room door, I barely recognized the stern, determined expressions on their faces. "Wendy, darling, where's the baby? Are you both okay?" Linda asked, rushing over to envelope us in a warm, protective embrace. "We're okay, just shaken up," I replied, the comfort of her hug unleashing the emotions I'd been holding back. Peter's usually gentle eyes were now hard with anger. "Where's Michael now? And Tom? I'll have a word with them. This is unacceptable, completely out of line. They're at the house, or at least they were when I left. Peter, I don't know what to do. This isn't the life I want for my daughter," I said, the despair clear in my voice. Linda held my hand tightly. "You did the right thing by calling us, Wendy. We're family, and we don't let family suffer alone. We'll deal with Michael and Tom, and we'll clean up the house. You just focus on this little angel," she said, her gaze softening as she looked at my daughter. We returned to the house, the sight of it still a sharp sting to my heart. As Linda and I tended to the baby, Peter confronted Michael and Tom. "Michael, Tom, look at this place. Look at what you've done. This is not how you treat your family, your home. Michael, you're a father now. It's time to act like it," Peter's voice boomed, his disappointment and anger filling the room. Michael's eyes were downcast, the bravado gone, replaced by a shameful realization of his actions. Tom, however, remained defiant, a sneer on his lips. "A real man doesn't need to apologize or clean up. This is all just women's work," Tom spat out, his words echoing the toxic beliefs of our past. The air crackled with tension, the clash of values palpable. With my daughter in my arms, I stepped forward, my voice steady and clear. "Tom, you're no longer welcome in this house. You brought nothing but chaos and disrespect. It's time for you to leave," I said, my decision final. The shock on Tom's face was evident, but the resolve in mine was stronger. He left without even looking me in the eye, like a stranger. Linda and Peter called a cleaning service, and slowly, the house began to transform back into a home. Michael, sobered by the events, began to apologize, his words a mix of regret and desperation. But the damage was done, and my trust was shattered. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, the events of the past few days felt like a distant nightmare. Sitting at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of coffee more for comfort than for taste, I watched Linda and Peter busy themselves with breakfast. Their presence was a balm, but the wound was deep, and healing felt like a distant dream. "Wendy, you need to eat something. You've been through a lot," Linda urged gently, placing a plate of toast and eggs in front of me. I managed a weak smile, my appetite lost in the sea of thoughts. "Thanks, Linda. I'm not really hungry." Peter looked over, his eyes kind but firm. "Wendy, you've got to keep your strength up, for you and the baby. And remember, you're not alone in this. We're here for you." I nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. It was comforting to have them by my side, but the decision that lay ahead was mine to make. As if reading my thoughts, Michael walked in, his steps hesitant, his eyes avoiding mine. The silence that hung between us was heavy, filled with words we couldn't yet voice. "Wendy, I don't even know where to start. I'm sorry, truly. I lost myself, but that's no excuse. I understand if you can't forgive me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The apology, sincere as it might have been, didn't erase the images that haunted my thoughts, the disarray, the neglect, the harsh words. It was a betrayal, not just of our vows, but of the trust and respect that had once been the foundation of our relationship. "Michael, I appreciate your apology. But this isn't just about forgiveness. It's about trust, respect, and safety, for me and our daughter. I need time, space to think, to understand if there's a way forward from here," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Michael nodded, the pain in his eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right, even if that means stepping back. As he left the room, the finality of the moment settled in. The future was a blank canvas, and the path I chose now would define the life my daughter and I would lead. Linda reached out, her hand warm and reassuring on mine. Wendy, whatever you decide, we're with you. You're stronger than you know, and this is just the beginning of a new chapter, a new dawn for you and your little one. Her words were a gentle reminder of the strength that had carried me through the darkest of times, the strength that would now light the way for the journey ahead. With my daughter cradled in my arms, her innocent eyes gazing up at me, I knew that the road ahead was mine to pave. It would be a journey of healing, of rediscovery, and of new beginnings.
In the quiet of my home, surrounded by memories and Mark's possessions, I was trying to find solace. I'm Ava, a 36-year-old widow, who swapped school corridors and children's laughter for the tranquility of private tutoring. My days revolved around music lessons, Mr. Whiskers, and the constant, silent gaze of the cat-shaped video camera, my digital eye on the world that Mark left behind. The doorbell's ring broke the monotony, an unusual interruption in my carefully structured solitude. It was Lily, my younger sister, with her daughter, Emily. Their sudden appearance at my doorstep was as unexpected as a snowstorm in spring. Hey, Ava. Just thought we'd drop by. How've you been holding up? Lily's voice had the usual chirpiness, but her eyes, always too keen, were scanning the living room, taking in every detail. I ushered them in, a reluctant host. I'm managing, Lily. And you? I heard about the divorce. Lily shrugged, a carefully casual gesture. Oh, you know, life happens. But look at you, living in this big house, all this luxury. Her gaze lingered on the items that were once part of Mark's daily life. It's not luxury, Lily. It's what's left of Mark, I replied, the words heavier than I intended. As the afternoon wore on, Lily's presence, once a mere annoyance, felt increasingly oppressive. Her comments, masked as casual observations, were probing, intrusive. The house, the belongings, my life under her relentless scrutiny. And then, as they prepared to leave, Lily's parting words left me uneasy. We should do this more often, Ava. Family should stick together, right? Her words, though seemingly innocent, felt loaded with an unspoken agenda. I nodded, non-committal, already dreading the next unexpected ring of the doorbell. As the door closed behind them, the silence settled back in, a stark reminder of the solitude I both cherished and mourned. I glanced at Mr. Whiskers, snoozing peacefully, oblivious to the complexities of human relationships. Looks like our quiet was just interrupted, Mr. Whiskers, I whispered, a sense of foreboding slowly creeping in. Little did I know, this was merely the prelude to the storm that was about to engulf my life. Lily's visits were becoming as predictable as they were unwelcome. It was a Tuesday, just past noon, when her knock echoed through the house, a disruptive force against the melody of a piano lesson I was conducting. My student, a shy boy of 10, jolted at the sound. I excused myself and opened the door to find Lily and Emily standing there, Lily with that all-too-familiar look of unsolicited advice ready on her lips. Ava, darling. You really need to brighten up this place, she declared, her voice piercing the calm ambience of my home. I sighed, feeling the weight of her presence. Lily, I'm in the middle of a lesson. Can this wait? She breezed past me, her disregard for my words as evident as her disregard for my personal space. Nonsense, he won't mind. Besides, I've got some great ideas for you. I followed her into the living room, my concern for my student growing. Lily, please. This isn't a good time. But she was already surveying the room, her gaze landing on Mark's belongings, his old guitar, the stack of books he loved, the photographs of our travels together. You know, Ava, you could make a killing selling some of Mark's old stuff. It's just sitting here, collecting dust, she suggested, her tone casual, as if she were discussing the weather. A sharp pain clenched my heart. Those things are not just stuff, Lily. They're memories. They're not for sale. She shrugged, her insensitivity on full display. Memories don't pay the bills, Ava. You've got to be practical. And speaking of practical, have you thought about putting yourself out there again? It's high time you moved on. I felt the room spin slightly at her words. Lily, my personal life is not up for discussion. And I'll thank you to keep your opinions to yourself. Emily, who had been a silent observer until now, interjected, her voice a soothing balm. Mom, maybe we should respect Aunt Ava's feelings. It's her life, after all. Lily shot her a look, then turned back to me. Oh, come on, Ava. You can't bury yourself in the past forever. There's a whole world out there. New people to meet, new experiences to be had. The boy, who had been trying to focus on his sheet music, looked up, his eyes wide with a mix of confusion and curiosity. Miss Ava, is everything okay? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I forced a smile, my heart aching with a mix of anger and sorrow. Yes, everything's fine. Let's get back to your lesson. Music is a great escape, isn't it? As I turned back to the piano, the notes we played together did little to drown out Lily's words that echoed in my head. Her presence, once merely annoying, was now a disruptive storm, uprooting the tranquility I had cultivated in my life after Mark's passing. The lesson ended, and the boy left, his glance back at the door revealing his concern. I sat there, the silence of the room now a void filled with Lily's words and the chaos they brought. Lily's visits had morphed from an annoyance into a full-blown invasion of my space. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I was in the middle of a violin lesson with one of my most diligent students when the familiar, unwelcome knock came. I opened the door to find Lily and Emily, their presence as disruptive as a thunderclap in a quiet sky. Hi, Lily, Emily. I'm right in the middle of something, I said, hoping my tone would convey the urgency of my situation. Lily, as always, brushed off my concerns. Oh, we won't be a bother. Just carry on. Before I could protest, they were inside, Lily making herself comfortable on the couch and flipping on the TV, the volume loud enough to drown out the gentle strains of the violin. I closed the door and turned to them, frustration simmering. Lily, really? I'm working. This isn't a good time. Lily waved a dismissive hand. Relax, Ava. It's just a bit of TV. Besides, Emily's hungry. You don't mind if she grabs something to eat, do you? Before I could answer, Emily was already rummaging through my fridge, the quiet hum of my home now replaced by the blaring TV and the clatter from the kitchen. I returned to my student, trying to salvage the lesson, but the disturbance was too much. Notes were missed, and the focus was lost. The lesson ended early, with apologies and a promise to make up for the lost time. Once the door closed behind my student, I turned to confront Lily, my patience worn thin. Lily, this has to stop. You can't just barge in here and take over. I have students, I have a schedule, and I have my own life. Lily looked up, unfazed. Oh, lighten up, Ava. It's not like we're here all the time. And your family. Family helps each other out. I felt a surge of anger. Helping out is one thing. Taking over is another. You're disrupting my work, Lily. And Emily, going through my fridge without asking? That's not okay. Emily, who had been quietly snacking at the kitchen counter, looked up, her eyes wide. I'm sorry, Aunt Ava. I just thought. I sighed, my anger softening at her genuine apology. It's okay, Emily. Just please ask next time. Turning back to Lily, I knew I had to stand my ground. Lily, listen. I love you, you're my sister. But if you're going to come over, I need you to respect my space and my rules. The room fell silent, the tension thick. Lily got up, her movements deliberate. Fine, Ava. Have it your way. Come on, Emily, let's go. After a week of silence, Lily's knock on my door felt like a bad omen. I opened the door with a guarded expression, bracing myself for another round of uninvited chaos. Ava, let's go shopping. A girl's day out, what do you say? Lily's voice was chirpy, but her eyes were calculating. I hesitated. I don't know, Lily. I've got a lot on my plate. Before I knew it, we were in the mall, Lily and Emily sweeping through stores like a whirlwind, piling clothes upon clothes on their arms. Ava, look at this dress. Isn't it gorgeous? Lily held up a sequined number, her face alight with excitement. It's nice, I replied, my enthusiasm failing to match hers. As we approached the checkout, Lily's demeanor changed. She patted her purse with a frown. Oh no. I think I forgot my card at home. My heart sank. I knew where this was heading. Lily, that's a lot of clothes. Maybe we can put some back? I suggested, hoping to minimize the damage. But Lily was already handing the clothes to the cashier. Ava, could you cover this for me? I'll pay you back, I promise. Reluctantly, I handed over my card, my stomach churning. The total amount flashed on the screen, a stark reminder of Lily's disregard for my finances. The ride home was tense. Lily chattered on, oblivious to my discomfort, while Emily sat quietly, her eyes apologetic. Ava, you're a lifesaver. I'll transfer the money to you first thing tomorrow, Lily declared as she got out of the car. I nodded, though I had little hope of seeing that money anytime soon. Lily, this can't happen again. I'm not a bank. Lily's smile faltered. Oh, Ava, don't be like that. We're family. And family helps each other out, right? But her words felt hollow, a poor excuse for taking advantage of my goodwill. As they disappeared into their house, I sat in my car, the weight of betrayal heavy on my shoulders. Days turned into weeks, and the echo of Lily's empty promises to repay the money for the shopping spree still hung in the air. I tried to brush it off, to focus on my lessons and the quiet comfort of my home. But the sense of unease, the feeling of being taken advantage of, lingered. Then, without warning, Lily appeared on my doorstep again, Emily in tow, her eyes downcast. Ava, we're in a bit of a bind, Lily started, her voice carrying an all too familiar note of desperation. Emily needs school supplies, and I'm strapped right now. I felt a tug at my heart as I looked at Emily, her expression a silent plea. Despite my frustration with Lily, I couldn't bear the thought of Emily going without. Okay. I sighed, my resolve weakening. Let's go get what you need, Emily. Lily flashed a relieved smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was a shadow there, a hint of something more, something I couldn't quite place. We kept the shopping trip short, sticking to the essentials. But as I handed over my card to pay, a simmering anger began to bubble up within me. Lily's promises were as flimsy as the receipts in my hand. A couple of days later, I was in the midst of a rare moment of peace when an unexpected knock at the door shattered it. A courier stood there, a pile of expensive clothes in his arms. "I have a delivery for Ms. Ava," he said, offering me the package. Confusion clouded my mind. "I didn't order these," I replied, my brow furrowed. That's when Lily, who had been lounging on my couch, casually strolled over. "Oh, those are mine. I had them sent here. You don't mind paying for these too, right, Ava?" The audacity of her request hit me like a slap in the face. This wasn't just borrowing, this was entitlement, pure and unabashed. "Lily, no. Absolutely not. This has to stop," I snapped, the frustration and anger I'd been holding back finally boiling over. "I'm not your personal ATM. You need to return every penny I've lent you, and you're paying for these clothes yourself." Lily's face twisted into a scowl, her usual charm replaced by indignation. "Wow, Ava, really? After all the times I've helped you?" "Helped me?" I echoed, incredulous. "Lily, all you've done is take advantage of me. I can't believe you'd stoop this low." For a moment, Lily seemed taken aback, as if she hadn't expected resistance. But then, her pride took over. "Fine," she spat, grabbing the clothes from the courier. "Come on, Emily. We're leaving." They stormed out, leaving a wake of tension and unsaid words behind them. The door slammed shut, but the impact of what had just happened reverberated through the empty house. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, filled with words left unsaid and emotions unprocessed. I was still reeling from the confrontation with Lily when the phone rang. It was a call I dreaded, yet somehow expected. It was Mom. "Ava, what's this I'm hearing about you and Lily? She's quite upset." Mom's voice was sharp, accusatory. I took a deep breath, searching for calm. "Mom, it's a complicated situation. Lily has been..." Mom cut me off, her tone brooking no argument. "Complicated? It's simple, Ava. Lily is going through a tough time. You should be supporting her, not adding to her troubles." The familiar pang of being misunderstood, of being the unreasonable one, hit me hard. "Mom, you don't understand. Lily's been taking advantage of my generosity. She's borrowed money and hasn't paid it back. She even..." Again, Mom interrupted, her words laced with disappointment. "Ava, she's your sister. Family sticks together. You have more than enough, while she's struggling. Can't you just help her out?" The implication stung. "Mom, it's not about the money. It's about respect. Lily feels entitled to whatever I have. Where do I draw the line?" Mom's sigh was loud, exasperated. "You're being dramatic, Ava. Lily needs you. We all need to pitch in when family is in trouble." I could feel the old, familiar pressure, the expectation to be the responsible one, the giver. But something had shifted within me. "Mom, helping is one thing, but being used is another. I've drawn the line. I'm not going to enable Lily's behavior anymore." There was a pause, and when Mom spoke again, her voice was cold. "Fine, Ava. If that's how you want to be, then so be it. But remember, family is all we have in the end." The line went dead, leaving a ringing silence in my ear. The conversation replayed in my mind, each word weighing heavily on my heart. It was clear that the divide wasn't just between me and Lily, it extended to Mom, to the very idea of what family meant. The role I'd been playing, the ever-supportive, ever-forgiving sister, was one I could no longer sustain. As I sat there, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, I realized the magnitude of what had just happened. I had stood up for myself, yes, but at what cost? It was when I noticed the small voids in the spaces once filled with Mark's things that my heart sank. Those weren't just objects, they were fragments of a life once lived, of moments shared. The realization that they were missing sent a wave of despair crashing over me. It was one thing to deal with Lily's financial exploits, but this? This was personal, a violation of sacred memories. In a daze, I racked my brain, trying to piece together who could have done such a thing. Then it hit me, the cat camera. The silent guardian of my home, the unblinking eye that watched over Mr. Whiskers. I rushed to my laptop, my hands trembling as I logged in to view the footage. The screen flickered to life, revealing the heart-wrenching truth. There was Emily, her young face tense with a mix of guilt and fear, her hands clumsily grabbing at the objects that held so much of Mark's essence. Behind her, urging her on, was Lily. The sight of it, the sheer audacity and betrayal, ignited a fury in me that burned with a ferocity I'd never felt before. Without a second thought, I grabbed my phone and dialed Lily's number. The line crackled, then her voice, casual, unaware of the storm about to hit. "Lily," I began, my voice a controlled calm before the tempest. "I know what you did. The camera saw everything. Emily, taking things, your things now, on your orders." There was a moment of silence, a stutter in the rhythm of deceit. "Ava, I don't know what you're talking about," Lily replied, her voice a poorly veiled mask of innocence. "Don't insult me, Lily. The camera doesn't lie. You used your own daughter to steal from me, from Mark's memory. You have to return everything. Now," I demanded, each word laced with a venom born of betrayal. Lily's voice turned cold, a defensive edge sharpening her words. "Ava, you've really lost it. You think I would do that? You think Emily would do that? Don't play games with me, Lily. I saw it all. Return what you took, or I'll have to involve the police," I said, the threat hanging in the air, heavy and undeniable. The line went silent for a heartbeat, 2 heartbeats. Then Lily spoke, her words a hiss of defiance. "You wouldn't dare. You don't have the guts." "I'm not bluffing, Lily. This is your last chance. Return what you took, or I'll take this further," I replied, my resolve as solid as the evidence I had. The line went dead, the silence after echoing louder than the words spoken. I sat there, the phone still in my hand, a sense of surreal disbelief mixing with the raw, unfiltered anger. The breach of trust, the violation of the most intimate memories, it was all laid bare, a wound that refused to be ignored. The atmosphere was tense when Mom, Lily, and Emily arrived at my doorstep. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and the weight of recent events. I could see the anger in Mom's eyes, the desperation in Lily's, and the shame in Emily's as they stepped into the house. "Ava, how could you threaten your own sister with the police? Do you want to ruin her life?" Mom's words were sharp, cutting through the silence like a knife. I stood my ground, the resolve in my heart steeling me against the storm of emotions. "Mom, this isn't about punishment. It's about accountability. Lily crossed a line, and there have to be consequences." Lily's eyes were watery, her usual confidence replaced by a plea for sympathy. "Ava, I'm sorry. I really am. I never meant for things to go this far." But it was Emily's expression that caught my attention. The young girl looked down, her face a portrait of regret and sorrow. It was clear she was carrying a burden far too heavy for her young shoulders. I sighed, the anger in me subsiding, replaced by a profound sadness. "I just wanted my things back, Lily. The money you owed me. That's all." Without a word, Lily reached into her bag and threw a smaller bag at my feet. The clinking sound of the items inside was a stark reminder of the painful breach of trust. She then handed me an envelope, thick with the promise of repaid debts. "There," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's everything. Are you happy now?" I picked up the bag and the envelope, my heart heavy. "It's not about being happy, Lily. It's about doing what's right." Mom looked at me, her expression a mix of anger and disappointment. "You've changed, Ava. You used to be forgiving, understanding. Now, look at what you've become." I met her gaze, my voice firm. "I haven't changed, Mom. I've just learned to respect myself enough to set boundaries. I wish you could understand that." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Then, without another word, Mom, Lily, and Emily turned and left. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house, a definitive end to a painful chapter. In the quiet that followed, I realized that while the confrontation was over, the journey of healing was just beginning. I had stood up for myself, defended what was rightfully mine, but at the cost of family ties that were now more fragile than ever. The only solace in this storm was Emily. Despite everything, she remained a faint ray of hope. Our occasional correspondence, her words filled with genuine remorse and a desire to understand, offered a glimmer of a possible future, one where forgiveness and healing weren't just distant dreams.
Hello there, I'm Rebecca. I'm 28 years old, fresh off the boat of a wedding to Richard, a man 7 years, my senior. But let's rewind a bit, shall we? Let me paint a picture of the day Richard and I first met. It was at one of those fancy garden parties our parents loved to throw. I was 18, fresh out of high school, and Richard was 25, the new hotshot in his father's company. I remember him walking up to me, a glass of champagne in one hand. "Rebecca, right?" he asked, his voice smooth as silk. "I've heard a lot about you." I remember blushing, not knowing what to say. "And you're Richard. I've heard a lot about you too." He laughed, a sound that made my heart flutter. Hopefully, all good things. We spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and to my surprise, connecting on a level I hadn't expected. It was that night that our parents, seeing us together, got the idea of us getting married. It took a few more years, but eventually, their plan came to fruition. Before we got married, we signed this prenup. It was a pretty simple deal. If one of us cheated, the other got to call it quits and walk away with a cool $3 million. I had no plans of playing away, so I put pen to paper without batting an eyelid. I remember the day we signed that agreement. My dad, a man of few words, but a heart as big as an ocean, looked at me with concern in his eyes. "Are you sure you're okay with this, Rebecca?" he asked. His voice was steady, but I could hear the underlying worry. "Dad, it's fine," I reassured him, giving him a quick hug. "I trust Richard, and he trusts me. This is just a formality." Richard was there too. It was he who insisted on signing this paper. "I don't want you to feel like you're being cornered, Rebecca," he said, his voice sounded a little strained. "If you're not comfortable with this, we can discuss it more." But I just shook my head and smiled at him. "Richard, I'm fine with it. I trust you." He seemed relieved and gave me a warm smile back. "And I trust you, Rebecca." That was the start of our journey. We got married in a grand ceremony that was the talk of the town. I was excited about this new chapter in my life, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing in the horizon. After the wedding, we moved into a beautiful house on the outskirts of the city. It was a dream come true, living with Richard, waking up next to him every morning. He was sweet, caring, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. Our honeymoon was like something out of a fairy tale. We spent 2 weeks in a beautiful beach resort, soaking up the sun and enjoying each other's company. But when we came back home, things started to change. Richard was suddenly a different person. He was distant, always lost in his thoughts. He would come home late from work and go straight to bed without even saying goodnight. We started sleeping in separate rooms, eating at different times, and barely spoke to each other. One day, I decided to confront him. "Richard," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on? You've been acting strange ever since we got back from our honeymoon." He looked at me, his eyes devoid of the warmth they once had. "I've just been busy with work, Rebecca," he replied, not meeting my gaze. "But we barely talk anymore," I pressed on. "We're living like strangers in our own home." He sighed, running his fingers through his hair. "I know, Rebecca. I'm sorry. I'll try to make more time for us." But things didn't change. If anything, they got worse. Richard started coming home even later, sometimes not until the early hours of the morning. He stopped eating with me, and we barely saw each other. I started having suspicions. Was he seeing someone else? The thought made my stomach churn, but I couldn't ignore the signs. I decided to confront him again. "Richard," I said one night when he came home late, "are you seeing someone else?" He looked shocked at my question. "What? No, Rebecca, I would never do that to you." "But you're always out, you never spend time with me," I said, tears welling up in my eyes. "I told you, it's just work," he said, his voice firm. "I'm not cheating on you, Rebecca." But I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. Richard was not the man I had married. He was distant, cold, and seemed to be hiding something. I didn't know what to do. I loved Richard, but I couldn't live like this. I decided to do some digging. If Richard wasn't going to tell me what was going on, I would find out for myself. I started by checking his phone when he was in the shower. I felt guilty about invading his privacy, but I was desperate for answers. I didn't find any suspicious messages or calls, but I did find something that made my heart drop. Richard had been searching for apartments. Was he planning on leaving me? I confronted him about it. "Richard, why are you looking for apartments? Are you planning on leaving me?" He looked taken aback. "No, Rebecca, I was just looking. I wasn't planning on leaving you." "But why were you looking?" I asked, my voice trembling. I don't know, Rebecca," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I need some space." One day, I decided to talk to my mom about it. She's always been my rock, my go-to person when things get tough. "Mom," I said, "I don't know what to do. Richard's changed. He's not the same person anymore." My mom listened, her face full of concern. "Rebecca," she said, "you're both still adjusting. You're newlyweds. It takes time to build a life together." I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that this was just a phase, that things would get better. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. Richard was hiding something, I could feel it. I tried to shake off the feeling, tried to convince myself that Mom was right. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It was like a nagging voice in the back of my mind, constantly reminding me that something was off. A few weeks later, I gathered my courage and approached Richard. "I need a job," I said, looking him in the eye. He looked surprised. "You want to work?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded. "Yes, I need to do something, Richard. I can't just sit at home all day." He thought for a moment, then said, "I can offer you a job at my foundation. We help kids in tough situations. Would you be interested?" I was taken aback. Richard's foundation was well known for its work with children. I had always admired the work they did. "Yes," I said, without a moment's hesitation. "I'd love to." Working at the foundation was a breath of fresh air. I was busy, I was doing something meaningful. I met kids who were strong, resilient, kids who had seen more hardships than any child should. It was heartbreaking, but it was also inspiring. The job kept me busy, kept my mind off the problems at home. Richard and I had our issues, but at least during the day, I had something else to focus on. The work was tough, emotionally draining, but it was worth it. I felt like I was making a difference, like I was doing something important. And for the first time in a long time, I felt happy. But even then, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. Richard was acting strange, distant. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something was wrong. And I was determined to find out what it was. Left with a whirlwind of questions and a heart heavy with betrayal, I decided to hire a private detective. I needed to know if Richard was cheating on me. It wasn't just about my pride, it was about my peace of mind. I couldn't live in the shadow of doubt, constantly wondering what went wrong. And then there was the prenup, the one we signed before we got married. If Richard was cheating on me, it wasn't just a betrayal, it was a costly mistake. I found a detective agency in the city, run by a man named Joe. He was an ex-cop, a grizzled veteran with a keen eye and a no-nonsense attitude. I told him my story, my suspicions, and he listened, his face impassive. "I'll do my best, Rebecca," he said when I finished. "But I can't promise anything. If your husband is cheating, he's doing a good job of hiding it." I nodded, understanding. "I just need to know, Joe. One way or another, I need to know." I remember the day he came to give me his report. His face was serious, his eyes sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Rebecca," he said. "I couldn't find any evidence that your husband is cheating on you." I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Part of me was glad that Richard wasn't cheating, but another part of me was frustrated. If he wasn't cheating, then why did he leave? What was he hiding? "Are you sure, Joe?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "There's nothing at all?" Joe shook his head. "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear." I thanked Joe and paid him for his services. As I watched him leave, I felt a profound sense of loss. I was back where I started, with more questions than answers. I was working at a charity fund when he walked in. His name was Daniel, the new guy. He was handsome, with a charming smile that could light up a room. He was smart, with a quick wit and a sharp mind. He was funny, with a sense of humor that could make anyone laugh. And he looked like a famous actor, with his chiseled features and striking good looks. In short, he was my ideal man. But as much as I was drawn to Daniel, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. His arrival seemed too perfect, too convenient. I couldn't help but think about Richard and the prenup. If I was caught cheating, I would have to pay a hefty sum of $3 million. Could Daniel be a trap set by Richard to catch me in the act? I decided to hire Joe again, the private detective I had used to investigate Richard. I asked him to look into Daniel, to see if he had any connections to Richard. Joe agreed to take the case. He started investigating Daniel, digging into his past, his connections. He followed him, watched his movements, his interactions. He was as thorough as ever, leaving no stone unturned. In the meantime, I tried to keep my distance from Daniel. It was difficult, especially when he was so charming, so attractive. But I had to be careful. I couldn't afford to fall into a trap, not when there was so much at stake. One day, Daniel asked me out for coffee. I was torn. Part of me wanted to say yes, to get to know him better. But another part of me was scared, worried about what Joe might find. "I'd love to, Daniel," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I'm really busy right now. Maybe some other time." Daniel seemed disappointed, but he didn't push. "Sure, Rebecca," he said, his smile dimming slightly. "Some other time." I felt a pang of guilt. What if I was wrong? What if Daniel was just a nice guy, and I was letting my suspicions ruin a potentially good thing? But I couldn't take the risk. Not until I knew for sure. A few days later, Joe came to give me his report. His face was serious, his eyes hard. "I'm sorry, Rebecca," he said. "But your suspicions were right. Daniel is working for your husband." I felt a rush of emotions. Anger at Richard for trying to trap me. Relief that I hadn't fallen for it. Sadness that Daniel wasn't who I thought he was. But above all, I felt a sense of vindication. I wasn't crazy. My suspicions were valid. "Thank you, Joe," I said, my voice choked. "You've done a great job." As I watched Joe leave, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had dodged a bullet, avoided a costly mistake. But I had also lost something. The image of the ideal man, the hope of finding love again. It was a bitter pill to swallow. But I wasn't going to let this get me down. I was stronger than that. I was going to move on, to find happiness again. I didn't need an ideal man. I just needed someone who was real, who was honest. And I was going to find that person, no matter what. I could have sent Daniel packing right then and there, but I decided to take a different route. I chose to play along, to befriend him. All the while, I made sure to keep my behavior above board, not giving Richard any reason to point fingers at me. Daniel, however, took my friendliness as a sign of something more. He started to loosen up, thinking he had me charmed. The irony was, he was the one getting played. But I didn't let Daniel in on the secret. I couldn't risk him running back to Richard. So, I kept up the act, maintained the friendly facade. One day, I decided to up the ante. I asked Daniel to join me for lunch, making it sound like a casual discussion about charity work. He agreed, a smug smile plastered on his face. He thought he was making progress. We found a quiet spot in the cafe. "So, Daniel," I began, "how are you finding the charity work?" He shrugged, a confident look in his eyes. "It's good. Different, but good." "And Richard?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you think of him?" Daniel looked surprised. "Richard? He's okay, I guess. Why?" I shrugged, attempting to look casual. "Just curious. He's a bit of an enigma, isn't he?" Daniel laughed, clearly relieved. "Yeah, he can be a hard one to read." We continued to chat about work, about life. I made sure to keep my tone neutral, not to give him any reason to be suspicious. In the days that followed, I continued to play along. I kept up the friendly act, making sure to never cross the line. I was always on my guard, always careful. It was a risky game, but one I was willing to play. For now. One day, during one of our lunch meetings, Daniel looked at me, a serious look on his face. "You know, I've been thinking." I raised an eyebrow, a chill running down my spine. "About?" He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "About us. About this thing we have." I felt my heart skip a beat. This was it. The moment I had been dreading. I forced a smile on my face. "And what is it that we have, Daniel?" He looked at me, a hopeful look in his eyes. I think we have something special." I felt a pang of guilt. Daniel was falling into my trap, just as I had planned. But it didn't feel right. It didn't feel good. But I had to keep up the act, had to keep playing the game. So, I smiled at Daniel, a fake smile plastered on my face. "Yes, Daniel," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We do have something special." And just like that, I had set the trap. The game was on. But at what cost? The Cold War at home with Richard was as icy as ever. We'd occasionally run into each other, exchange chilly greetings, and then retreat to our separate corners. Most nights, he'd be at his apartment, claiming it was more convenient for his work commute. One sunny afternoon, I dialed Daniel's number. I laced my voice with a warmth that was as fake as his documents, inviting him over to my place. He probably thought I was finally ready to give in to his advances. Poor guy, he couldn't have been more wrong. As Daniel stepped into my home, he was greeted not by a seductive housewife, but by my old classmate, now a stern-faced police officer. He'd agreed to help me out, and the surprise on Daniel's face was worth every bit of it. The officer checked Daniel's papers and, as expected, they were as fake as a $3 bill. Now, it was time for my move. I offered Daniel a choice. He could either stick with Richard and face the consequences of his fake documents, or he could switch sides and work for me. Daniel's eyes darted between me and the officer, and after a moment of silence, he nodded. He agreed to my deal. Checkmate, Richard. With that, the real game began. I had Richard's pawn now playing for my side. But I knew this was just the beginning. Richard was a crafty man, he wouldn't go down without a fight. In the days that followed, I kept a close watch on Daniel. Despite his agreement, I knew I couldn't fully trust him. He was a wild card, a potential threat. But for the time being, he was a useful one. One day, I summoned Daniel to my office. "We need to talk," I said, my tone serious. He looked at me, a hint of unease in his eyes. "About what?" "About Richard," I replied. "I need to know everything. His plans, his strategies, everything." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I'll tell you everything I know." And just like that, I had my insider. My counterattack was ready. But this was just the beginning. The real battle was still ahead of us. Richard wouldn't go down without a fight, and I had to be prepared. I had to be ready. Because this wasn't just a game anymore, it was war. And in war, there are no rules. Only survival. Days turned into weeks, and I was getting antsy. I wanted to confront Richard, to show him I wasn't the pushover he thought I was. Joe, whom I turned to once again, had given me some advice. "Push Richard," he'd suggested. "Make him think you've fallen into his trap." It was a gamble, but I was ready to play the game. So, Daniel and I staged a photo shoot. We posed in ways that could be seen as compromising, as proof of an affair. But we were careful. We kept the originals, where everything was as innocent as a Sunday school picnic. Once the photos were ready, I gave them to Daniel. "Give these to Richard," I'd said, handing over the envelope. "Let him draw his own conclusions." Daniel had looked at me, concern etched on his face. "You sure about this?" he'd asked again. "Once you start this, there's no going back." "I know," I'd replied, a steely resolve in my voice. "And I'm ready." The very next day, Richard was all smiles at dinner. He thought he'd caught me, that he'd got one over me. But he didn't say a word about it. But I wasn't worried. I knew what was coming. I was ready. Meanwhile, Joe was on the case. He was digging up dirt on Richard, finding all the evidence we needed. He was good at his job, and I trusted him. And finally, Joe called. Richard relaxed and lost his caution. "I've got him," he said, his voice rough with satisfaction. "I've got all the proof of Richard's cheating. Photos, videos, the whole shebang." I felt a rush of excitement. "Good," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "Let's bring him down." But I didn't confront Richard. Not yet. I wanted him to think he was winning. I wanted to see the look on his face when he realized he'd been played. So, I waited. I played the part of the dutiful wife, waiting for Richard to make his move. I knew what was coming, and I was ready. The clock was ticking towards the family dinner. I knew this was it, the showdown. I felt a strange calmness. I was ready. The dinner was at Richard's parents' mansion, a sprawling estate that reeked of old money. Richard was there, of course, playing the doting son and husband. But I knew the truth. And soon, everyone else would too. We were halfway through the main course when Richard cleared his throat. He stood up, a smug smile playing on his lips. "I have something to say," he announced, his eyes on me. He pulled out a set of photos of me with Daniel. He tossed them on the table like he was playing a winning hand. "Proof," he said, his voice filled with triumph, "of my wife's infidelity." The room went quiet. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. But I didn't flinch. I was ready for this. I calmly stood up, meeting Richard's gaze. "Yes," I said, my voice steady, I know this man. But he's not my lover. He's an actor. Hired by you, Richard, to frame me. I pulled out my phone and hit play. The room filled with the Daniel's voice, confessing everything. Richard's smile faltered. His eyes widened in shock. But I wasn't done. I pulled out my own set of photos and videos, evidence of Richard's own affairs. I tossed them on the table. What about these, Richard? I asked, my voice cold. Can you explain them? Richard stammered, tried to deny it, but the evidence was undeniable. His parents' faces turned to stone. My parents, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. You ungrateful brat, my father roared at Richard. We trusted you with our daughter, and this is how you repay us? Richard's mother was in tears. How could you, Richard? She sobbed. How could you do this to us, to her? The aftermath was swift. We divorced. Richard's parents, furious at their son's deceit, fired him from their company. His reputation was in tatters. And me? I walked away with $3 million in compensation. Now, Richard is jobless, scrambling to pick up the pieces of his life. And me? I'm free. I'm enjoying the peace, the silence. I'm enjoying my life without Richard. I won. I took on Richard and won. I outsmarted him, played his own game better than he did. And it feels good. It feels right.